Husband dragged his wife to court to steal her $500 million fortune unaware. She owed the company he worked for what the judge did the moment I gave him. An envelope shocked him. He didn't just betray her. He marched her into a courtroom to steal everything she built, a fortune worth $500 million. In the morning, Elena Brooks steadied her breath and tucked a sealed envelope into her handbag. Her husband, Michael, stood at the plaintiff's table with a smile that felt like a knife. At his shoulder sat Vanessa, the consultant who became his shadow. Half of her company, Michael told the judge, and full control of the accounts. Those were the words that tried to erase years of Elena's work. Instead of honoring his vows, he weaponized them. Instead of love, he chose power. He thought she would fold under the weight of legal papers and public shame. But what he never knew was this. The fortune he tried to seize was tied by contract to the one place he could not touch the company he worked for. Elena didn't bring rage to court. She brought records. She brought dates. She brought the truth her mentor taught her to keep. And inside that envelope was the clause that would turn his victory into a trap he built for himself. Sometimes the person who drags you to court ends up dragging their own name through the fire. This is not just a story about money. It is the calm strength of a woman who believed too much, the silence she chose instead of screaming, and the moment a judge read a single page and changed everything. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it is like letting her voice fade again into silence. But when you click that button, you stand with every woman betrayed, every promise broken, and every survivor who chose to rise. Please, subscribe now. And in the comments, share where you're watching from. The sound of shattering glass broke the silence. A porcelain cup fell from Elena Brooks' trembling hand, coffee splashing across the white marble floor. She stared at her phone screen, heart pounding, eyes wet. For a moment, the world went still. The email subject read, "Notice of court summons, Brooks versus Brooks." Her husband's name, her name, together but against each other. She closed her eyes, chest heaving, then whispered, almost to herself, "He actually did it." The intensity hung in the air, sharp and cold. Then, like a woman forcing herself to breathe again after drowning, she reached for a towel and began wiping the floor. Her movements were slow, deliberate, the discipline of someone who built her life from chaos. Elena Brooks was 39, tall and poised, with eyes that carried both exhaustion and quiet strength. Every movement of hers felt intentional, the mark of a woman who had fought too long to ever waste time again. To the world, she was a self-made millionaire, the visionary founder of Brooks Innovations, a technology company built from a single software patent she created in her mentor's garage 2 decades ago. To herself, she was just a woman who once believed that loyalty was the same as love. Her morning routine never changed. Wake up before sunrise. Make black coffee, no sugar, no cream. Write 3 things she was grateful for in her leather notebook. Today her pen hovered over the page. She couldn't think of a single thing. A flash of memory flickered a younger Elena, sitting beside Professor Richard Everlin, her mentor, who once told her, "You don't need luck, Elena. You need consistency. That's rarer than genius." She lived by those words. When he passed away 5 years ago, he left her the company they built together. But Elena didn't take it as a gift, she treated it like a trust. To honor him, she diversified, quietly investing pieces of her empire in smaller companies, diversified trust accounts, she'd call them, smiling when people teased to her about being overly cautious. No one knew those small stakes would later become her unseen armor. Her husband, Michael Brooks, entered the picture 12 years ago. He was charming, ambitious, and bold. A financial advisor with just enough confidence to make her believe he could protect her heart and her business. At first, he did. He was her balance. He'd bring her food when she skipped meals, text her reminders to rest, whisper that he'd handle the world for her so she could dream in peace. But as her empire grew, his laughter changed. It became sharper, louder. Sometimes when people congratulated her, he'd smile too long as if their praise stung him. Still, she loved him. She thought success would eventually make him feel secure. A knock on her home office door pulled her back to the present. Michael walked in, wearing a crisp shirt, cologne heavy in the air. He looked polished, calm, too calm for a man whose wife just got a court summons. "Rough morning?" he asked, pretending not to notice the broken cup. She looked up. You filed it, didn't you? He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to her desk, fingers brushing the golden frame that held their wedding photo. It's not personal, Elena. It's business. Her throat tightened. Business? You're suing your wife for half her company? He sighed, like a man explaining something simple to a child. Half our company. You built it during our marriage. That means it's joint property. She stared at him, the man she trusted with her passwords, her future, her heart. The man who once said, I don't need your money, Elena. I just need you. She realized now maybe that was the first lie. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a set of papers, cold, official, stamped. I want us to keep this civil, he said, placing them on her desk. His tone was smooth, like someone closing a deal, not ending a marriage. Sign these. It'll make things easier. Elena didn't move. She simply turned to the side drawer of her desk and opened it. From inside, she pulled a thin blue folder labeled Joint Access. He froze for a second, confused. She stood, placed it gently in front of him, and said softly, You already have access to everything, Michael. My accounts, my shares, my life. What else could you possibly want? He smiled, but it wasn't warm. Control. Her eyes flickered with disbelief. Then came her voice, steady and heartbreakingly calm. I never thought giving you access to my life would cost me my peace. For a long moment, neither moved. The silence was suffocating. Michael picked up the folder, flipped through the documents, every account, every key, every password listed neatly. His lips twitched into a grin, the kind of grin that made the air around him feel colder. Elena studied him carefully. She noticed it now, how his fingers tightened slightly on the folder, how his gaze lingered not on her face, but on the figures printed in black ink. It was the same look she'd seen once before, years ago, when he first stepped into her mentor's office and glanced at the company valuation sheet. The moment passed, but something inside her shifted. The coffee stain on the marble, the shattered cup, his emotionless face, all of it painted one truth she could no longer deny. She wasn't standing across from her husband anymore. She was standing across from a man preparing for war. As he turned to leave, he paused at the doorway, smiling faintly. Tomorrow I'll have my lawyer contact you. Let's handle this like professionals. The door shut softly behind him. Elena exhaled shakily, the sound barely escaping her lips. Her eyes fell to the broken pieces of porcelain on the floor, small, sharp, and scattered. She knelt and picked up one shard, whispering to herself, If he wants war, I'll give him silence first. She placed the shard on her desk beside the kriss folder, a quiet symbol of something fractured yet dangerous. Outside, the sound of Michael's car engine faded down the driveway. Elena looked toward the window, sunlight streaming in, and for the first time in years, her reflection looked like someone she didn't fully recognize. Then softly, almost as if to no one, she said, If control is what he wants, he'll soon learn what it costs. The knife slammed against the cutting board, sharp, loud, deliberate. Michael Brooks wasn't angry. He just wanted her to know who set the rhythm. The sound cut through the soft music playing in the background, making Elena flinch slightly from across the kitchen. She looked up from her tablet where she'd been reviewing quarterly reports. You're chopping too fast, she said gently, trying to sound casual. He didn't look up. Maybe you're just watching too closely. The air turned tense, quiet but heavy. Dinner that night was supposed to be peaceful. Elena had spent the whole day in meetings, trying to pretend her husband's lawsuit wasn't real. The house was spotless, candles lit, tables set, her silent effort to restore normalcy. But Michael didn't want peace. He wanted control. He poured himself a drink, eyes following her every movement as she sat down. Still working? He asked, gesturing toward her tablet. It's just a few notes for tomorrow's board call. He smirked. You really think you need to attend that? The company has people for that now. Let them handle it. I like to stay involved, she said quietly. That's your problem, Elena. You don't know how to let go. The words stung more than she wanted to admit. There was a time he would have been proud of her focus. Now every success she had sounded like an accusation in his tone. Years earlier, before her mentor passed, Michael worked under him at Everland Technologies, the same company where Elena had started. Michael had been ambitious. Then the youngest analyst in his department, always trying to impress Richard Everlin. He'd stay late, bring ideas, fight for recognition. Then came the promotion day. Everyone expected him to be chosen as the new department head. But Everlin had instead picked Elena, quiet, analytical, disciplined Elena, because he saw something in her Michael didn't have: restraint. Michael had laughed it off at the time, saying, "Good for her." But later that night in their small apartment, he'd poured himself whiskey and muttered, "One day, I'll never have to ask anyone for approval again." That night was the first time Elena saw something dark flicker behind his eyes. Not anger at her success, but humiliation that she had what he wanted. Now, sitting across the table years later, she could still see traces of that same shadow. Their dinner began in silence. Michael ate quickly, movements sharp and impatient. "Did you talk to your assistant today?" he asked. Suddenly, Elena looked up. "Rachel?" "Yes, why?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "She doesn't know her place. Always calling, always reminding you of things. You don't need someone like that." "She's efficient," Elena replied, keeping her tone even. "I trust her." "Trust," he repeated, smiling without humor. "You use that word too easily." He reached for his glass again, eyes narrowing slightly. "Rachel looks at me oddly sometimes, you know. Maybe she forgets who runs this house." "She's just doing her job, Michael," Elena said softly, trying to keep her voice calm. But inside, something small and sharp twisted in her chest. After dinner, Elena carried the dishes to the sink. The sound of water running filled the room, the only thing drowning out the quiet tension between them. From behind her, Michael spoke again, his tone lighter but cutting. "You know, for someone worth $500 million, you sure don't act like it." She turned, startled. "What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged. "You're still simple. No luxury cars, no private chefs, no mansion upgrades. You hoard your wealth like it's going to vanish." Elena frowned. "It's not about showing off. It's about protecting what we built." "We built?" he repeated, the words almost mocking. "You think you'd be where you are without me?" Her voice faltered. "Michael, no, say it. You think all your success is your own?" For a moment, the warmth in her eyes dimmed. She wanted to argue. She wanted to remind him of the nights he slept while she worked through dawn, coding software and drafting proposals. But instead, she whispered, "You help me, that's what matters." He smiled again, but it wasn't love. It was triumph. Later that night, Rachel called. Elena excused herself and answered in the hallway. "Ma'am," Rachel said quietly, "I reviewed the account summaries you sent. Did you mean to include the joint access documents? They have full clearance for your private holdings." "Yes, I gave them to Michael." Rachel paused. "Are you sure that's wise?" Elena laughed softly, though her voice carried a trace of sadness. "You worry too much. That's what love is, Rachel. Trust." Rachel hesitated, then replied, "Be careful, Mrs. Brooks. Some people mistake kindness for weakness." The line went silent. Elena stood in the hallway, the phone still against her ear long after the call ended. When she returned to the dining room, Michael was already clearing the table, or pretending to. The joint access folder was missing from where she had left it earlier. "Did you move the file?" she asked. He didn't look at her. "Just organizing. Don't worry, I'll keep it safe." The way he said it, calm, deliberate, sent a chill through her. Elena smiled faintly, forcing warmth into her voice. "Of course you will." But her hands trembled as she placed the dishes down. She didn't know why, but something inside her whispered that the folder wasn't in their home anymore. It was already being copied, somewhere else. The blinds snapped shut behind him. Michael Brooks turned sharply, heart thudding as Vanessa locked the office door with a soft click. The sound was small, but it carried weight, the sound of something dangerous beginning. He stood behind his desk, pretending to focus on the spreadsheet glowing across his monitor. But he wasn't looking at numbers. He was looking at power, hers and his. Vanessa leaned against the wall, her voice smooth as silk. "You really should relax, Michael. You look like a man carrying too many secrets." He didn't respond at first. His fingers tapped against the desk, restless. She smiled knowingly and stepped closer. "You said you wanted to take control of your life. I can help you do that." The day had started like any other. The buzz of phones, the hum of the office, the smell of coffee mixed with ambition. But nothing about Vanessa Morgan was ordinary. She was new at the firm, hired 6 months ago as a business consultant, but everyone knew she was more than that. Sharp mind, sharper tongue. The kind of woman who could convince a man to jump and make him believe it was his idea. Her role in Michael's life began quietly, one conversation after another, during late nights in the office. She listened when no one else did, praised his intelligence, told him how underappreciated he was, and Michael, starved for validation, after years of standing in his wife's shadow, began to believe her. The first time they met was at a corporate networking dinner. Elena couldn't attend, she'd been sick that evening, so Michael went alone, eager to make an impression. Vanessa had walked straight to him, confident, radiant. "You're Elena Brooks' husband," she said, her tone light but curious. "Yes," he'd replied. "You've heard. Of her? Who hasn't?" She laughed softly. "But I've heard of you too, the man behind the genius." The compliment struck him like a spark. They talked for hours about business, ambition, and fairness. She listened intently as he complained about being the forgotten partner. Then she leaned closer, her perfume strong and deliberate. "You deserve more than being her shadow, Michael," she whispered. He laughed awkwardly, but she continued. "You know marriage law, right? What's hers is half yours. If you play it right, you could take control of everything you've helped build." Her words were casual, but they hit like a seed buried deep in his mind, one that would grow slowly, wrapping around his ego like ivy. Back in the present, Vanessa walked around his desk, her heels tapping softly. She placed a hand on his shoulder, fingers resting lightly but intentionally. "You've been collecting those documents I told you about?" Michael's throat went dry. "Yes, everything she owns. Access codes, partnership papers, the works." "Good." She smiled, brushing imaginary dust from his jacket. "You're learning." Most men would have hesitated. He hesitated now, though, voice low. "She trusts me, Vanessa. She gave me those documents because she believes I'd never hurt her." Vanessa's expression shifted, not cruel but calculated. "And that's exactly why you'll win, because she'll never see it coming." Michael swallowed. For the first time, a flicker of guilt passed across his face. "You think I could actually win this?" Vanessa leaned close, her voice almost a whisper. "With the right paperwork and my guidance, yes." The room went quiet, except for the faint buzz of a printer in the corner. On Michael's screen, folder names flashed open: joint access, corporate ownership, patent rights. Vanessa watched as he copied files to an encrypted drive, her reflection flickering across the glass. "Monitor. Remember," she said, "this isn't theft. It's justice. You've been under her name for too long." He forced a smile. "Justice. Right." Vanessa tilted her head. "You don't sound convinced." He looked up at her, his voice almost breaking. "She believed in me when no one else did." Her tone softened, though her eyes stayed sharp. "Belief doesn't feed a man's pride, Michael. Power does." As he shut down the computer, she stepped closer. Close enough that he could smell the faint scent of her perfume again. Something floral, intoxicating, dangerous. "Once this is over," Vanessa whispered, "you'll finally have what you deserve. Half her empire, full control, and your own name back." He stared at her, unsure whether to feel thrilled or terrified. Then she leaned in and kissed him, slow, deliberate, sealing the betrayal like a contract. When she pulled away, her voice was calm, confident. "You'll thank me when it's over." Michael stood frozen, staring at the screen where Elena's financial world was now sitting on his flash drive. Outside the glass office walls, the city lights reflected across his face, one side bright, the other buried in shadow. He didn't know it yet, but that single act of copying those files had tied his fate to something much larger, something he couldn't control. The next morning, Elena will notice small inconsistencies, missing files, changed passwords, subtle signs that someone close is turning her world upside down. But instead of confronting, she will choose silence and begin to quietly watch. The door burst open before the meeting even ended. Elena Brooks looked up sharply as her lawyer, Daniel Carter, rushed into the conference room. His face was pale, lips pressed tight. Everyone in the room, board members, executives, assistants, turned in confusion. He didn't wait for permission. He simply placed a thick brown envelope on the table in front of her and said quietly, I'm sorry, Elena. It's official. The air changed instantly. The hum of conversation died. The clicking of pens stopped. Only the soft buzz of the air conditioner remained. Elena stared at the envelope. Her hand hovered over it for a long moment before she finally pulled it open. Inside, the first line burned into her memory. Petition for division of marital assets, Brooks versus Brooks. Her husband's name above hers. The betrayal made real on paper. The entire room froze. No one spoke. The weight of it pressed down like gravity itself. She closed the folder, fingers trembling slightly, and pushed it aside. Her voice was calm, distant. Everyone, please continue. We'll discuss the merger projections later. They hesitated, unsure whether to leave or stay, until Daniel gestured discreetly, and they began filing out of the room one by one. When the door shut and the silence returned, Elena's composure broke just a little. Her breathing hitched and her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She looked out the window, the city skyline stretching endlessly beyond the glass. To everyone outside, she was a symbol of success, composed, confident, untouchable. But inside, her heart was cracking under the weight of a truth she'd avoided for too long. In that moment, her voice would later whisper in reflection, I realized he never loved me. He studied me. 15 years earlier. A tiny apartment, flickering light bulb, laughter echoing off peeling walls. Elena and Michael sat cross-legged on the floor, sharing a bowl of instant noodles. Their first year of marriage poor but hopeful. He'd looked at her then, smiling that bright, ambitious smile. If we ever make it big, he said, we'll share everything, right? She laughed, nodding without hesitation. Everything. That word had meant love to her. Partnership. Now it felt like a weapon. Back in the present, Daniel stood, quietly by the window, giving her space. He was in his early 40s, professional yet kind, the kind of lawyer who had seen enough broken marriages to recognize the look in her eyes. After a long silence, he said softly, he's asking for half the company, Elena. He claims joint ownership under marital property law. Her gaze remained fixed on the skyline. Half of Brooks Innovations, she murmured. The company I built before he even quit his job. He's using your open access agreements, the ones you gave him. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Of course he is. Daniel hesitated, then added, there's more. He's filed for temporary control of several accounts, including your personal trust funds. Elena turned to face him then, her eyes sharp but steady. He thinks this will scare me. He thinks it'll make you settle, Daniel replied. She picked up the summons again, flipping through the pages with slow precision. Every paragraph, slicing a little deeper. Her hand paused over Michael's signature, bold and self-assured, like a man who thought he'd already won. For the first time, she allowed herself to whisper the thought she'd been avoiding. He planned this for months. Daniel took a cautious step closer. Do you want me to file an immediate response? We can request an injunction to freeze joint accounts. Elena shook her head slowly, her expression unreadable. No, she said quietly. Not yet, he frowned. Elena, if you wait too long, she interrupted softly, her tone almost gentle but chilling beneath the surface. I want to see how far he'll go. She stood and walked to her desk, pulling out an old framed photo their wedding day. Her in a simple white dress, him holding her hand, both of them smiling as if forever was certain. She studied it for a long time before setting it face down. Her voice came out in a whisper, more to herself than to Daniel. He once said, we'd share everything. I just didn't realize he meant my piece too. Daniel lowered his eyes, sensing the quiet fury rising in her. He didn't argue. He only said, you're sure about waiting? Yes, she said, turning back toward the window. Let him think he's winning. I'll watch. The lawyer nodded slowly, though the worry in his eyes deepened. He gathered his files and headed for the door. As he reached the exit, Elena's voice stopped him. Daniel, she said without turning around, find out who's helping him. Someone is. He paused, nodded once, and left. Alone again, Elena pressed her palm against the cold glass, her reflection staring back at her strong, silent, calculating. Somewhere deep down, the woman who once believed in love was gone. In her place stood someone else, someone watching, waiting. That same night, Daniel's quiet investigation will lead him to a name that doesn't belong in Michael's world, a woman whose Influence and ambition run deeper than anyone suspects, and Elena, instead of confronting, will decide to let that woman reveal herself. The sound of the gavel cracked like thunder. All rise. The courtroom filled with tension as everyone stood. Elena Brooks lifted her head slowly, face calm, expression unreadable. Across the aisle, Michael Brooks straightened his tie and smiled not at her, but at the reporters waiting to capture his victory. The judge entered, and everyone sat. This was it, the first day of Brooks versus Brooks. Michael leaned toward his lawyer, whispering something with a smirk. His voice was too low for most to hear, but Elena caught one word: easy. Her eyes flickered to the woman sitting quietly behind him. Vanessa Morgan, dressed in black, her expression perfectly neutral. To anyone else, she looked like a professional consultant taking notes. To Elena, she looked like the reason her marriage had died. She didn't stare long. She didn't need to. The betrayal had already taken shape in front of everyone: her husband, his lawyer, and the woman who'd coached him to take her life apart piece by piece. Michael's lawyer, Mr. Pesses. Howard rose first. He was sharp and confident, his words cutting through the quiet room. Your Honor, he began. My client, Mr. Brooks, has been wrongfully excluded from assets that are rightfully his. We will show that Mrs. Brooks concealed financial information, hid company shares, and moved corporate funds without disclosure. Gasps rippled softly through the courtroom. Elena didn't move. Mr. Howard continued, for years, she's hidden behind the illusion of independence, yet the law is clear. What's acquired during marriage is shared equally. My client seeks control of 50% of the Brooks Corporation. The words hit like bullets, but Elena didn't flinch. Across the room, the judge nodded and turned to her. Mrs. Brooks, do you wish to respond? Her lawyer, Daniel Carter, stood calmly. Your Honor, we will respond in full when the time is appropriate. For now, we ask to let the evidence speak for itself. Michael sat back, his confidence growing. He looked like a man who had already won. Every time his lawyer spoke, he nodded slightly, as if confirming a truth the world had ignored for too long. Behind him, Vanessa's smile barely moved, just the faint curve of satisfaction. He rehearsed lies so often, he began to believe them. Elena's voice echoed quietly in her thoughts. She watched as Michael projected the image of a wounded husband, betrayed by a powerful wife who hoarded wealth and affection. The jury looked sympathetic. The reporters scribbled furiously, but Elena knew something. None of them did. Every accusation he made today would help her destroy him tomorrow. 2 weeks earlier, late night, Elena in her office. Daniel at her side, whispering, if we can prove he accessed corporate data illegally, we can expose his breach of confidentiality. Elena had smiled faintly. I don't want to expose him yet. I want him to expose himself. She had quietly gathered everything, every email, every file transfer, every copied document. The evidence was ready. She just needed him to believe he was untouchable a little longer. Back in court, Mr. Howard presented spreadsheets, transaction histories, asset lists, all carefully selected and rehearsed. Mrs. Brooks, he said mockingly, can you explain why these funds were moved into secondary accounts under your maiden name? Elena looked directly at him, her voice calm and steady. Yes, those were diversified trust accounts established before my marriage. You'll find the date of formation on the bottom right. He glanced down. The date was 5 years before the marriage. The courtroom murmured. Michael's jaw tightened. Mr. Howard recovered quickly, clearing his throat. Even so, your husband contributed significantly to the success of these companies. His partnership deserves recognition. Elena tilted her head, her voice smooth. If recognition were measured by contribution, he'd have mine. But greed measures differently. For the first time, Vanessa's smile faded slightly. The judge called for a recess. Michael stood, walking past her table. As he passed, he whispered, You're calm now. Let's see how calm you are when I own half your name. Elena didn't look up. She simply replied, quiet but cutting, You'll own half of what destroys you. He frowned, confused, and walked away. When the judge returned, the final words of the day came from Michael's side. Mr. Howard stood tall, voice echoing, Your Honor, my client seeks control of 50% of the Brooks Corporation. The judge nodded slowly. We will proceed. A hush fell over the courtroom. Elena's face remained expressionless, her eyes distant, almost serene. Her thoughts whispered, calm and dim, deadly. He had no idea what 50% really meant. That night, as Michael celebrates his win, Elena will make her first quiet move, uncovering the buried truth about his employer, the company that unknowingly ties both their fates together. What she discovers will shift the entire war. The storm outside hit like a warning. Thunder cracked through the night as papers scattered across Elena's desk, caught by the sudden rush of wind from an open window. She hurried to close it, her silk robe brushing against stacks of files, her mind spinning faster than the storm itself. Her phone vibrated, a message from Daniel, her lawyer. Daniel, I found something. You might want to sit down before you read this. Attached was a document. One glance at the company header made her freeze. Everlyn Group, her mentor's old company. The same company that had once saved her and now, somehow, connected to the man trying to destroy her. She sank into her chair, staring at the glowing screen. Her breathing slowed. Memories began to uncoil, one by one. A young Elena sat in a tiny office, head buried in her hands. Her startup had failed, debts piling high, her dreams slipping away. Then, an older man's voice had broken the silence, calm, kind, firm. Every visionary stumbles, Elena. What matters is who helps you rise. It was Professor Richard Everlyn, her mentor. He'd taken a chance on her when no one else would. He invested through his holding company, Everlyn Group, saving her business from collapse. In return, she signed a lifetime agreement, a symbolic gesture of gratitude. Everlyn Group would forever own 20% of her company, and she would pay yearly dividends in his honor. He passed away 3 years later, but the agreement lived on unbroken, unspoken, sacred. She had often told people, I'll always owe my mentor's company more than money. Now, those words returned to her like a prophecy. She opened Daniel's message again. Beneath the header was a single line, Michael Brooks, Senior Financial Advisor, Everlyn Group. Elena's pulse quickened. Her husband, the man dragging her to court, demanding half her fortune, worked for the same company that already owned part of her business. Her eyes widened as the truth sank in. If Michael won his case, he wouldn't just be taking from her, he'd be taking from his employer. That was corporate theft, a direct violation of his employment contract. Her whisper filled the quiet room. So, he wants to steal from his employer without knowing it. The irony was almost poetic. She leaned back in her chair, the tension in her shoulders slowly easing as a faint smile crept onto her face. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel cornered, she felt powerful. Everything he had built on lies was about to collapse on truth he never bothered to learn. Elena stood and walked toward the window again. The rain had softened, now, tapping gently against the glass. The world outside was still, reflective like her. She pulled out an old photograph from her drawer, one of her and Professor Everlyn, standing outside the First Brooks Innovations office. He was smiling, holding her first patent certificate. I won't let your legacy be touched by his greed, she murmured. Then slowly she began gathering documents, her original contract, the dividend reports, and the signed debt agreement. She placed them neatly in a folder and labeled it in bold black ink, Everlyn Holdings Legal Reference. The folder would later become an envelope, and that envelope would become her weapon. The next day, Elena will meet with her mentor's former lawyer, the only man who knows the fine print of her debt agreement. That meeting will shape the perfect trap for Michael, one sealed not with vengeance but with law and irony. The printer spat out pages like gunfire. One after another, legal documents slid into the tray, their words heavy with finality. Elena Brooks stood beside the desk, hands steady, eyes cold. It was midnight. Her study glowed under a single lamp, casting long shadows across the walls, shadows that moved when she did, as if echoing her thoughts. On the desk sat an unmarked brown envelope, her weapon, her proof, her justice. The phone rang once. She picked it up before the second tone. Mrs. Brooks? A man's voice asked, firm but familiar. Mr. Halden, she said softly. Thank you for meeting me this late. Arthur Halden, her mentor's former lawyer, had been retired for years. He'd served the Everlyn Group faithfully, a man known for his honesty and his loyalty to Richard Everlyn, the man who built both her career and her conscience. "I've reviewed the old files you sent," he said. "I think I understand what you're planning." "Then you know why I can't lose this," she replied. There was a brief pause before he spoke again. "You won't lose. But I must warn you, when you reveal this, there's no going back. It'll destroy him completely." Elena's gaze fell to a framed photo of her and Michael from happier years, smiling, holding hands, the illusion of love. She didn't look away. "He destroyed himself," she said. "I'm just turning on the light." Half an hour later, the front door opened to the quiet footsteps of Mr. Halden. His white hair glowed faintly under the hallway light, and in his hands, he carried a single folder sealed with a faded Everlyn Group emblem. "This is it," he said, placing it on her desk. "The original clause. Everlyn's company policy still stands. Your husband's contract includes it." Elena opened the folder carefully. Her eyes scanned the page until she found the line she needed. "Any attempt by an employee to claim personal ownership of assets belonging to or associated with Everlyn Group clients constitutes grounds for immediate termination and legal forfeiture." It was the missing piece, the key that turned betrayal into justice. Michael wasn't just trying to take what was hers. He was trying to take what belonged to his employer, his mentor's legacy. Elena closed the folder and looked up, calm but resolute. "He wanted to win the war in court," she said quietly. "I just had to hand him the gun he loaded himself." "Mr." Halden nodded slowly, eyes filled with respect. "Richard would have been proud of you." When he left, the house fell silent again. Elena sat down at her desk, sliding the papers into the brown envelope. Her movements were deliberate, slow, almost ceremonial. She melted a stick of red wax and pressed her seal into it, the Everlyn crest a reminder of where it all began. The wax cooled, hardening like her heart. She whispered to the empty room, "Tomorrow he'll meet the truth he's been pretending not to see." She set the envelope in her briefcase and turned off the light. The lamp went dark, but the red wax glowed faintly in the moonlight, a small, silent promise of what was to come. The next morning, the courtroom will fall into an eerie silence as Elena hands that same envelope to the judge. What lies inside will not just end Michael's lawsuit, it will erase his career, his pride, and the illusion that he ever had control. The gavel hit once, sharp as a thunderclap. Court is now in session. The room was packed. Cameras lined the back wall, reporters hunched over notepads, and the low murmur of whispers faded as the judge took her seat. Elena Brooks sat motionless at the plaintiff's table, hands clasped on her lap. She looked calm, composed, almost serene, but her stillness carried weight, a storm hidden behind control. Across from her, Michael Brooks smiled like a man who already saw victory. He adjusted his suit jacket and leaned back, eyes glinting with arrogance. Behind him, Vanessa Morgan sat quietly, her posture perfect, face unreadable, but her gaze darted to the brown envelope lying beside Elena's lawyer. Michael didn't notice. He was too busy admiring himself. "Your Honor," began Michael's attorney, Mr. Howard, "after weeks of deliberation, evidence, and testimony, my client only asked for what he is lawfully entitled to, his rightful half of Mrs. Brooks' company." He paused, turning dramatically toward the jury. "For years, he supported his wife's ambitions, contributed ideas, and sacrificed his own career to build her empire. But she rewarded his loyalty with deceit and exclusion. We ask for fairness. 50% of Brooks' innovations." A ripple of sympathy moved through the courtroom. Elena didn't blink. Michael leaned toward her table and whispered with a smug grin, "This is what justice looks like, Elena. Fair, isn't it?" She didn't answer. Her gaze remained on the envelope. The judge turned to Elena's lawyer, Daniel Carter. "Mr. Carter, final statement?" Daniel stood, his tone calm but firm. "Your Honor, my client has been painted as deceitful, but facts are stubborn things. Today those facts speak for themselves." He turned slightly to Elena. She gave a slow nod, a quiet signal. Daniel reached into his briefcase and pulled out the sealed brown envelope. The wax seal glimmered under the courtroom, lights red, unbroken, deliberate. He placed it gently on the table in front of the judge. "Inside this envelope," he said, "is a document that clarifies ownership, employment, and contractual violation, all tied directly to the assets in question." The judge frowned slightly. And what is it exactly? Daniel stepped back. Proof. Michael chuckled, shaking his head. More drama, Elena? Another delay tactic? His voice carried arrogance, but beneath it, a thin edge of nervousness slipped through. Elena finally turned to face him. Her voice was soft, but it cut like glass. You wanted the truth, Michael. It's about time you saw it. The judge broke the seal and unfolded the papers. For a long moment, the courtroom fell into complete silence. The judge's eyes moved back and forth across the pages. The sound of turning paper filled the air like the ticking of a clock. Then, slowly, the judge looked up. Her tone shifted, cool, authoritative. Mr. Brooks, she said evenly, are you aware that Everlyn Group owns 20% of Brooks Innovations, the company you are attempting to claim half of? Michael blinked, confused. What? No, I wasn't aware. And are you also aware, the judge continued, that you are currently employed by Everlyn Group? The color drained from Michael's face. His mouth opened, but no words came. The judge tapped the document. According to this contract, any attempt by an employee to seize or personally profit from assets tied to an Everlyn Group client constitutes immediate termination and immediate termination. Forfeiture of benefits. Mr. Brooks, you've just violated your own employment agreement. Gasps broke through the courtroom. Michael stumbled to his feet. That's not possible. She set this up. The judge's expression hardened. Set it up? You built it yourself? You signed the contract? And you filed the lawsuit? Elena's eyes stayed fixed on him, calm, steady, the quiet strength of someone who no longer needed to raise her voice to be heard. Vanessa's pen fell from her hand. Her face lost all color. Without a word, she rose from her seat, smoothed her skirt, and quietly walked out of the courtroom. Michael didn't even notice she was gone. He was frozen in disbelief, his career unraveling in front of the cameras. The judge continued. This court will not only dismiss your claim, Mr. Brooks, but I strongly suggest you prepare for a legal response from your employer. We're done here. The gavel hit again, final, echoing, absolute. Elena stood slowly, gathering her papers. She turned to Daniel, who gave her a nod of quiet satisfaction. Michael, pale and shaking, reached out a hand toward her. Elena, wait. She looked at him for the first time, with no anger, no pity, only truth. You wanted half of everything I had, Michael. Congratulations. You just lost everything you had. She walked away as cameras flashed, her heels clicking in rhythm with his collapse. Outside the courtroom, as Michael faces reporters in humiliation, he will make one final desperate attempt to speak to her not for love, but for survival. And in that moment, karma will finish what justice began. The courthouse doors slammed open. Michael Brooks stumbled out, chased by the flashing chaos of cameras, questions, and murmured judgment. His name, once spoken with envy, now echoed with pity. He blinked under the blinding light, eyes frantic, searching through the crowd. Elena, he shouted, his voice cracked. Elena, wait! She was already halfway down the steps, calm, composed, her lawyer by her side. The same press that once called them the power couple of the decade now formed a wall between them. He pushed through it, desperate. Please, Elena, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Reporters turned their cameras to capture every word the fallen husband begging the woman he betrayed. She stopped. The air around them seemed to still. Slowly, Elena turned. The noise faded, the crowd's whispers dulled into silence. All that existed in that moment were two people and the ruins of what once was love. Her expression was unreadable, not cruel, not cold, just quiet strength. Didn't know what, Michael? She asked softly. That I'd survive you? He took a step closer, his voice trembling. I thought you'd never find out. I thought, that's the problem, she interrupted gently. You never thought I'd think. The words hit harder than any shout. Michael froze, eyes wide, lips parting but no sound coming out. Around them, cameras clicked, like the ticking of fate. A court officer emerged from the doorway, calling out, Mr. Brooks, you've been served. Michael turned sharply. Two uniformed men approached, handing him a stack of papers, notice of asset seizure. He glanced down, scanning through the lines, his face draining of color. All accounts frozen. All holdings suspended. Employment terminated. Pending legal action from Everlyn Group. His knees gave out. The papers fluttered to the ground, scattered by the wind the final remnants of his empire. Lawyers nearby whispered quietly, one of them muttering, "That's it. He's finished." Michael tried to stand but couldn't. He reached out not for balance, but for mercy. "Elena," he gasped, his voice breaking. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted what was fair. Please, help me." She looked down at him, the man who once stood, taller than her, the man who believed love was ownership. There was no anger left, only clarity. "You wanted half my fortune," she said softly. "Instead, you lost your soul." Her words lingered in the air like a verdict. Cameras flashed wildly as Michael's hands trembled, clutching the courthouse steps. His face was pale, his suit wrinkled, his confidence gone. For the first time in his life, he looked small. Elena stepped forward, close enough that only he could hear her next words. "I didn't destroy you, Michael. You just finally met yourself." He lifted his head, tears streaking his face. "Please, I have nothing left." Elena's gaze softened, not in pity, but in understanding. "Then maybe now you'll learn what love without greed feels like." She turned away and began walking down the steps. Behind her, the cameras captured the image that would become tomorrow's headline, "The Kneeling Man." Michael Brooks, once a name of ambition, now on his knees before the woman he betrayed, his fortune frozen, his career erased, his pride shattered. Elena reached the last step and paused. The wind caught her hair, lifting it gently as if the universe itself exhaled relief. She looked back once, just once, her eyes soft, not cruel. For a moment, the woman she used to be flickered behind the strength she'd become. Then she turned and walked into the sunlight. Behind her, Michael collapsed fully, surrounded by the very noise he once craved: flashes, questions, whispers, all now meaningless. "He wanted half my world," her voice echoed in reflection. "But in trying to take it, he lost his own." That night, Elena will stand alone in her home, quiet, peaceful, holding a single letter from Evelyn Group, thanking her for protecting their legacy. But as she looks out the window, a faint shadow will remind her that victory never comes without cost, and some debts are never fully repaid. The morning light poured through the glass walls, soft and golden. For the first time in months, Elena Brooks' office felt alive again. No whispers of betrayal, no storm of doubt, only quiet, steady peace. The faint hum of the city below sounded like a heartbeat returning after silence. On her desk lay two things: a copy of the court's verdict and the brown envelope that had changed everything. She opened the drawer slowly and placed them side by side, not as trophies, but as reminders. One symbolized justice, the other, patience. Her voice came softly, reflective, and calm. "I gave him everything once, my love, my loyalty." The envelope wasn't revenge, it was truth wrapped in patience. She ran her fingers across the embossed Everland seal, tracing its edges like an old memory. A small smile touched her lips. She wasn't the same woman who once believed love meant surrender. She was someone tempered by loss, strengthened by silence, reborn through restraint. The sunlight caught the corner of a new letter resting on her desk. She opened it, a crisp white card with gold lettering. Everland Group Partnership Renewal approved. Her mentor's legacy lived on. Her empire was stronger than ever, not because she fought harder, but because she learned when not to. She stood, walking to the window. Outside, the world moved on, people rushing, living, building. She whispered softly, repeating her mentor's words as if they were prayer. "Those who build with love will always outlast those who take by greed." A gentle wind swept through the room, as if in answer. The photo of her and Professor Everland shifted slightly, the corners catching the light. She smiled again, not out of victory, but understanding. In the end, revenge hadn't freed her. Truth had. As the camera pulled back, the brown envelope remained in focus, sealed, quiet, timeless. Because sometimes, the most powerful justice isn't loud. It's written, signed, and left to rest in peace. A soft chime from her phone, an unread message. Unknown sender. The subject line reads, "He's trying to contact you." She doesn't open it. She only looks at it once, then closes her eyes. Some stories, after all, are meant to end in silence.